Hello, my name is Dr. MarkAlain Dery. I am the Medical Director of Infectious Diseases and the Chief Innovation Officer for Access Health Louisiana. I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, although now we have 2 hurricanes coming. What? In the middle of COVID? I serve as the co-chair for the ACOI Infectious Diseases Subspecialty Section. You've seen me do these updates now for the past few months, and thank you for all your positive comments that I've been getting from folks. Now, I've been doing these in conjunction with the leadership of the ACOI, and I hope these messages are helping you keep up with the latest on COVID-19. I know that many of you are in the thick of the fight, and I'd like to thank you all on behalf of all of us who focus on infectious diseases for a living, but certainly on behalf of the ACOI. Moving together and moving forward together with the ACOI, we will continue to share this information as it becomes available, as well as some of the hopeful progress that we're seeing. So, speaking of the ACOI, are you registered yet for the virtual convention? And if you're not, please do so today. There's an opportunity to save 50 smackaroos by registering before September 21st. So don't miss that chance. The virtual convention will be like nothing else you've ever done virtually. They're pulling out all the stops to make this really, really a cool event. Plus, with the sessions from so many of our members, including this guy right here, you don't want to miss it. So I think of no other, there's no better way, and there's no less stressful way to get your CME credits for the year. So I look forward to seeing you there, and let's go on to the stories, which I think are really cool. But before we do, I said last week I was going to show you this cool new mask that I got. Check this one out. This is the Plague Doctor. There you go. It's the Plague Doctor mask, and check it out. Right, now this is a mask, right? This was made by a friend of mine, Miranda. She said a plague doctor mask for a plague doctor. So how cool is that? Coolest mask ever. Okay, let's get on. Let's go to the stories. All right, so let's talk about this. So this is a really important story, really, really interesting story about how children are playing a larger role in COVID transmission. And we've been talking about that here, and specifically on this vlog, we've been talking about all sorts of different COVID spreading concerns, including people who have been deemed super spreaders, as well as those super spreader events that we talk about as well. So that's where a large number of unmasked and not socially distant people, shame on you, transmit the virus. Now, we've also talked about silent spreaders, and these are people who are asymptomatic, right? And they unknowingly transmit virus. But for the first time, we're going to talk about a whole different set of silent spreaders, and that's children. Okay, so much has been said about children and the rate of infection that it also has somewhat gotten misconstrued, and that children don't get COVID at all. They do, which we know is not true. Okay, but a new study that was published just last week in the Journal of Pediatrics that I am sure you heard about because it really made the news, but I wanted to break it down for y'all here because this article provides some indisputable evidence that kids are carrying with them huge viral loads, okay? In fact, the study found that some of the kids had higher levels of virus than critically ill adults who were in the same phase of the disease that the children were at. So this, of course, has huge implications as schools are reopening. Teachers in some states are staging protests about going back. Others are choosing early retirement to avoid the risk of getting infected. And this study really does justify their concern. So in it, there was 192 children, 49 of whom were diagnosed with COVID-19, and 18 of them actually had that multi-system inflammatory syndrome, which is believed to develop from COVID-19 in some cases. But only 50% of the children had symptoms, and early on in the pandemic, it was deemed that children tend to have mild symptoms, if any. So as a group, they've been largely dismissed. And again, now what we're finding out is that very likely, studies like this are showing us that they're very likely to be silent spreaders. And they have been the entire time. So, okay, so this evidence is ultimately adding up. And at the end of July, it was announced that children who were younger than 5 and had symptoms actually had higher levels of virus in their noses when compared to other kids or adults. It was a very important study. So again, they went and they swabbed these children. This is another study. They went and they swabbed these children, and they found that again they had these very high levels of virus. And yet other studies also found that older children passed the virus on to adults passed the virus on at the same rates as adults. Right? That was a very important study. It was in South Korea. 10 to 19-year-olds transmitted virus at the same rates as 70 to 79-year-olds. All right, so independently, these studies offer plenty of contradictions, but also consider what they mean when looked at as a whole, right? Since various studies uncover a variety of conclusions. First of all, the most important thing is that we all need to be wearing masks at all times. No. Okay, so the latest study that was done by the Massachusetts General researchers was shocking too, when you realize that some of the kids that are out there playing, hanging out with friends, and are generally out in the world walking around with higher viral loads than adults who are very ill and isolated, okay? The recent study also showed a higher percentage of children who tested positive than the typical adult percentage. It was 25% versus 20% for adults. Plus, age didn't seem to be a factor in the amount of virus present, which, by the way, tend to be at its peak about 2 days into the infection. And another puzzling conclusion was that children, also we've talked about that here on this vlog a bunch of times, children have lower ACE2 receptors, yet that doesn't seem to matter when it comes to carrying viral load or carrying virus. Nor did a condition such as asthma present seem to be a primary determinant to severe illness. Okay, all this, bottom line, all right, more studies are needed. National Institute of Health is spending the dollars to do it, and they're going to invest $20 million to study biomarkers and other indicators that will characterize how the disease progresses in children. But while future studies are great, it doesn't help educators and administrators around the country who are not sure what they are stepping into, as some are heading back in person to classes. And again, I'm not going to make the joke because this is serious, but in schools, all people in closed rooms all need to be wearing masks. Anybody over the age of 2 need to be masked. That's the only way people are going to stay safe. Okay, so let's talk about convalescent plasma. You probably heard that it was on hold. So let's talk about why that's the case. So for a while we were on the road of thinking that plasma from recovered COVID patients could be a viable option for those in the thick of the battle of the virus, and it still might be. But now the brakes are being halted since clinical trials have not shown that plasma, this convalescent plasma, has been helpful. Even my friend, Dr. Fauci. Even my friend, Dr. Fauci, urged holding off and pushing for widespread plasma treatment since a Mayo Clinic study did not find the data to support emergency approval for the treatment. Now, it doesn't mean that what we were doing wasn't necessarily the wrong thing to do. Obviously, we've been doing this for 100 years using convalescent plasma with previous epidemics. I do feel it was appropriate for what we knew, given the situation, and it made sense, again, historically, because that's how other infectious diseases have been treated, and we've known that it's been safe. So this Mayo Clinic study looked at 35,000 COVID-19 patients and found that plasma administered within 3 days of diagnosis did reduce mortality rates versus those that got it at 4 days plus, and it was 21.6% versus 26.7%. So that's pretty significant. Okay. Now, another study found that patients who received plasma were more likely to be alive at 4 weeks later compared to those that didn't receive it. So again, without affirmation of results from randomized trials, which of course, as we know, are the gold standard for scientists, there's certainly there's not a certainty to rush to pin our hopes on whether or not convalescent plasma is the right thing to do. So as a NYU infectious disease specialist said, he said it well when he said that emergency approvals could compromise the perception of how people view trials. And to be honest with you, I agree, and I think that we all want to be sure when we say that something works that it actually does. The other thing that was really interesting about it too was, as we know, the levels of antibodies fall over time, right? About 3 months, so your IgG falls, right? And that's that's the acquired immunity. And we're starting to see more data that shows that innate immunity really retains the ability to those memory B cells and T cells still retain that information to code for to code for that spike, right? That N1 spike off of the COVID-19. So should somebody see COVID-19 again, theoretically, antibodies are there that could be produced by these memory B cells and T cells. So again, in March and in April, when people had high levels of antibodies, that convalescent serum was certainly convalescent plasma was important. But if you had COVID-19 in March and now you're giving blood in August, well, I mean, it's highly March, let's say April, May, June, right? April, May, June, you've lost antibodies. And so one of the things that they did in the study was they looked at people who had what concentrations of antibodies they had in their system, and those who had the highest concentrations of antibodies in their plasma were more likely to live, and those that had the lowest concentration of antibodies in their plasma were more likely to pass. So that's really important, I think, something for us to really keep in mind moving forward as well. Okay, so please stay on the lookout for our regular updates, and to read more from the sources used in this report, go to acoi.org/COVID-19. Together with the ACOI, we will help you have the latest information to help you respond to your patients and stay on top of the crisis. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime at madery@mac.com. Please stay safe. We can do this together. Let's do this again. Please stay safe. We can do this together. I think my beak is hitting the microphone. Sorry. Wow, these are hard to use.